There I was, standing at the edge of my own farmland, watching Karen's $220,000 wedding tent flutter like some royal pavilion in the breeze. Music was blasting, guests in stilettos trampling through my young soybean plants, and then her caterer has the nerve to ask if I could move my tractor. Apparently, it was messing up the aesthetic. That's the moment I calmly hit the switch, and the manure spreaders roared to life. Cut to intro. How did things end up like this? Let's roll back the clock. I'm the sheriff of a quiet little county tucked away in the Appalachian foothills. Think winding roads, dense forests, and the kind of place where folks still wave at each other, even if they don't mean it. I spent 2 decades in the military before coming home to care for my father after his first stroke. He passed away last spring. Left me the land and the hunting lodge he'd built with his own hands over 30 years. He always called it his cathedral. And standing there, surrounded by pines and peace, I finally got what he meant. That place isn't just timber and nails, it's legacy. Family. It's everything he taught me, about grit, about patience, and about keeping your boots clean, even when the world's a mess. And then came Deborah Witherspoon, president of the local HOA. Fresh off a divorce and charging forward with a clipboard like it's a weapon. She looks like a 2003 JCPenney catalog come to life and drives a Lexus that probably thinks gravel roads are a myth. She's the kind of person who thinks every issue can be handled with a fine, a form, or a forced smile. I'd seen her once or twice, back when she was still playing housewife in the cul-de-sac that sits next to my land. Never paid her much mind, until she suddenly decided my dad's lodge was a threat to her precious sense of neighborhood harmony. See, my family's lodge sits just 10 feet outside of the HOA boundary. Just 10. It's never been a part of their little organization, and never will be. But that didn't stop her from marching up to my porch one Saturday morning, holding a clipboard like it was handed down from Mount Sinai. I was midway through fixing a storm shutter when I heard heels crunching on gravel. I turned around, and there she was, standing like she owned the place. "Hi there," she chirped, as if she hadn't just walked onto private property without so much as a knock. "I'm Deborah, president of the Sycamore Bluff HOA. We've received a few complaints about your structure." She said structure like it was a dirty word. I wiped my hands on a rag and raised a brow. "You mean my family's lodge?" She gave me that tight, fake smile. "Yes, well, the logs appear untreated, and your woodpile is visible from the road. It doesn't quite match the community aesthetic." I looked behind her, nothing but forest for half a mile. "The community? You mean the raccoons?" She didn't like that. Huffed a bit, pulled out a stapled packet from her clipboard, and handed it over. "These are the HOA guidelines. Section 8 covers structure visibility, landscaping, and color palettes." I didn't even touch the papers. "I'm not in the HOA." Her smile twitched. "You're adjacent to it. That creates visual impact. We're trying to maintain property values. Now, I'm not the kind of man who looks for trouble. But I won't back away from it either." I looked her dead in the eye and said, "This land's been in my family since 1952. That lodge was here long before your subdivision. And unless your rules were written by the Almighty himself, they don't apply to me." I figured that'd be the end of it. But I was wrong. Next week, signs popped up along the gravel road that leads to my land. Private HOA residents only. Laminated, nailed to stakes, had her little fake HOA logo and everything. One blocked the trailhead I hike. Another was right at the bend where my dad's old hand-carved sign still stands, "Welcome to Fox Hollow." I yanked them all up and burned them in my fire pit that night. Next morning? They were back. Then came the letters, fines, in shiny white envelopes with her HOA letterhead. Violation, unauthorized structure. Violation, unapproved fire pit. Violation, wildlife attractant. Apparently, putting out corn for the deer is now considered criminal activity, in Deborah's eyes. Again, not in the HOA. I sent her an official cease and desist. Cited zoning laws, property rights, even offered to meet and talk things through civilly. She responded by reporting me to the local utility company. That's when things got personal. One night I came home, and the power was gone. No storms. No downed lines. Just off. I checked the meter, and sure enough, the power hadn't gone out because of a storm, it had been shut off manually. When I called the utility company, the woman on the line told me a complaint had been filed. They claimed my property was a safety hazard, an uninhabited structure, an immediate risk. I had to dig up my land deeds and legal documents just to prove I had the right to live there and get my electricity turned back on. That's when I realized, this wasn't some petty neighbor drama anymore. This was a full-on campaign. She wanted that lodge gone. And she didn't care what it took to make that happen. What she didn't know. I've got more patience than a pew full of churchgoers on Easter Sunday. And I don't play fast, I play smart. So I started watching. Documenting. Building a case. Every fake violation notice, every photo of the signs she posted, records of anything she tampered with, statements from neighbors she'd threatened or bullied, I saved it all. I didn't plan on using it, not yet. Part of me still hoped she'd lose interest and find a new hobby, like harassing someone's mailbox decorations or patio plants. But instead, she took it up a notch. One Saturday morning, I spotted tire tracks cutting across the trail behind my shed. I followed them, and found someone, probably her or someone she hired, had dumped a load of contractor waste right into the creek. Bits of drywall, paint cans, broken siding. I reported it. Cleaned it up myself. And decided I was done playing nice. I put up a big wooden sign right at the edge of my land. Private property. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. Clear. Direct. The next day, it was gone. Not just removed, replaced. With a cheap plastic sign that read, "Future site of Sycamore Bluff Nature Park, sponsored by your HOA." That's when I finally saw it for what it was. This wasn't just a control freak on a power trip. This was a land grab. She wanted to claim my property, fold it into her little HOA kingdom, and probably bulldoze the lodge to put in picnic tables and yoga decks. But the moment that truly broke the dam, the one that flipped the switch from tolerance to war, was the wedding tent. No request. No warning. Just trucks pulling in one day, caterers, florists, all acting like it was their backyard. She had decided that the field behind my barn was perfect for her niece's rustic-themed wedding. Said she had verbal approval from the county. I stood there, watching them hammer stakes into my soil, roll carpets over my soybean rows, line up rows of white folding chairs like it was straight out of some bridal Pinterest board. And then, the caterer walks up to me, looks me dead in the eyes, and says, "Would you mind moving your John Deere? It's ruining the shot." That's when I calmly walked over, and flipped the switch on the manure spreaders. What happened next? Well, the internet got a front row seat. But we're not there just yet. While half the guests were scrambling to dodge flying compost and wipe frosting off their rental tuxedos, my phone rang. It was the fire department. A blaze had broken out in the woods, near the lodge. And I knew, before the siren, before I saw the smoke rising through the trees, before the ash hit my windshield, I knew exactly what had happened. She had taken it a step too far. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't some careless camper. It sure as hell wasn't a controlled burn. It was arson. And somewhere deep in my gut, the same place that always knew when someone was lying, I knew who was behind it. By the time I reached the ridge, the lodge was already lost. Flames had ripped through those timbers like kindling. Over 3 decades of my father's craftsmanship turned to a charred frame. The front porch had collapsed. The stone chimney stood like a tombstone. Even the elk head he'd mounted above the fireplace, the one we got together when I was 12, was now just ash. Glass windows shattered from the heat, their twisted frames glowing like embers. Firefighters were still putting out the outer edge, trying to stop the flames from spreading through the forest. I stood there, soaked in sweat and smoke, jaw clenched so tight I could hear my own teeth creak. One of the fire chiefs, Charlie, came up slow, helmet in hand, face grim. He didn't have to say anything, but he did anyway. "We found a gas can," he said quietly, tucked under the brush on the far side of the foundation. I felt my jaw twitch. "Could have been someone dumping trash," I muttered. He hesitated. Then shook his head. "There's more. Ignition points aren't natural. Multiple accelerant trails. And, well, you need to see this." He led me behind what was left of the tool shed. In the damp soil were boot prints. Not from firefighters. Not hikers. Tactical, lightweight tread. Size 8. Maybe 9. And definitely not mine. One of the boot prints wasn't from any of my guys. Not anyone I recognized. And definitely not mine. But you know who does wear brand new tactical boots when she's playing dress up in the woods? Karen. Just 2 days earlier, I'd seen her at the local army surplus store, arguing with the cashier over the price of a camouflage jacket. I remembered it clear as day, because she kept calling it couture combat wear, like she was on some kind of fashion tour, not preparing for a hike. And now, right behind the still-burning ruins of my father's lodge, were footprints, wearing those exact same boots she was bragging about, like she was heading into a war zone photo shoot. But the real smoking gun came later. See, I'm not stupid. Ever since the fake complaint that got my power cut, I started setting up backup cameras around the property. Not the kind you see screwed into a wall, hidden wildlife cams. Tucked in the trees, mounted in the rafters, all motion-triggered and cloud-synced. And you know what fire can't destroy? Cloud backups. At the station, I sat down with my laptop, opened the footage, and started scrubbing through hours of wind-blown leaves and curious squirrels. Then I saw her. Deborah Witherspoon, local HOA queen bee, dressed head to toe in camo, skulking around like some bad extra in a budget war movie. She was carrying a red plastic gas can. She crept up to the side of the lodge just before sunset, looked over her shoulder twice, then poured liquid around the base of the building. She paused, lit something, a rag maybe, and dropped it like she was lighting the Olympic torch. The fire caught almost instantly. She stood there and watched it for a moment, then turned and walked away. No mask. No hood. Nothing to hide her smug little face as she strolled off, proud of what she'd done, proud of burning down the last piece of my father's legacy. I didn't move for a full minute. Just stared at the frozen frame of her, illuminated by firelight. I could have called her out right then. Could have marched over to her perfect little McMansion and slapped a pair of cuffs on her right there in front of the HOA board and her professionally groomed poodle. But I didn't. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about arson anymore. It wasn't even just about revenge. It was about everything: the fake violations, the forged signs, the harassment, the stolen peace of mind, the lies she spun and got away with. So I took my time. Built the case quietly. I pulled her phone records. Tracked the gas can purchase. Got security footage from the local gas station where she filled it. Talked to neighbors she'd threatened, people she'd bullied over violations like wind chimes or mailboxes painted in unsanctioned shades of blue. And then, while combing through public records, I found something wild. The HOA bylaws she kept throwing in people's faces, quoting them like gospel, had never been legally filed with the county. Which meant all the power she claimed to have. All fake. And it didn't stop there. With more digging, I found out Karen had bullied the entire HOA board into resigning. Except, they didn't actually resign. She forged their letters. Fake names, fake dates, fake signatures. Then she published them in the neighborhood newsletter and declared herself president for life. No vote. No meeting. No permission. And nobody challenged her, because, let's be honest, she's exhausting. Loud, manipulative, and relentless. People just gave up. But I wasn't people. I had the receipts. The footage. The fraud. And the final puzzle piece came from the last person I expected, her niece. She showed up at the station one morning. Mid-20s. Nervous, but clearly fed up. She apologized for the wedding mess, then said she had something to share. Turns out, Karen had big plans. She'd been pitching a wellness retreat idea to the HOA, trying to convert the entire area behind my barn into a fancy commercial spa. Trails, gazebos, overpriced mineral baths, the whole luxury escape fantasy. But my lodge, and the fact that I refused to sell, was the one thing in her way. So she figured, if it mysteriously burned down and I got tired of fighting, maybe I'd just give up and move on. One less stubborn landowner with rights. I thanked her for coming forward and made sure she got home safe. Then I opened a new folder on my case file. Arson. Fraud. Forgery. Criminal impersonation. Harassment. Abuse of power. And that was just what I had so far. I wasn't going to kick her door in just yet. I wanted her to sweat. To keep mailing her fake fines. Posting her fake rules. Believing she was untouchable. But the last piece, the twist I wasn't ready for, came 3 days later. Just as I was finalizing the arrest warrant, one of my deputies called. Said I needed to get down to the county clerk's office. Tucked in the corner of a newly submitted permit application was Deborah's signature, on a document claiming my land had been conditionally annexed as community property under the HOA's expansion efforts. She'd officially filed paperwork claiming ownership of my burned land. And in doing so, she made one last, glorious, fatal mistake. She gave me the legal excuse I needed to burn down her whole fake little empire. Now the question wasn't if she was going down, it was how loud I could make it when she hit the ground. I could have arrested her right then and there. I had everything. The footage. The boot prints. The gas can. The motive. The paper trail. And now, a signed, certified document where she claimed legal rights over land she had no ownership of, land she had torched. But see, I didn't want an arrest. I wanted a spectacle. I wanted every smug, passive-aggressive HOA letter she'd ever mailed to echo back at her in a courtroom. I wanted her empire, her fake authority, her self-declared queen of the HOA throne to go down in flames twice as hard as she thought she'd burn my lodge. So I got to work, quietly, methodically. And I didn't just focus on the arson. I dug into everything. Her HOA board, her finances, her legal filings, her shady, under-the-table, contractor deals. I even pulled zoning complaints and spotted a nasty pattern. Every single property she fined or threatened? They were owned by elderly residents. Single moms. Folks working 2 jobs with no time to push back. People she figured wouldn't fight back. And until now, they hadn't. So I started reaching out. One by one, I sat in their kitchens, drank overbrewed coffee, listened to their stories. And man, did they have stories. Miss Lorna? Had her birdbath dismantled because it was an unauthorized water feature. Bill? Got fined for using non-regulation holiday lights. The kicker? He's Jewish. She fined him over a menorah. She charged late fees on dues that didn't exist. Threatened legal action with law firms that didn't even exist. Used the threat of liens, false ones, to scare folks into paying up. She was running a fear-funded dictatorship wrapped in HOA letterhead. And nobody stopped her, because nobody knew how. But now they had me. And I was done being polite. I called in a few favors at the state level. Got a fast-track review of her forged HOA charter. Guess what? Not only was it not notarized properly, most of the signatures? Copied from a yard sale sign-up sheet from last year. She literally used names from people who came to buy crockpots and folding chairs, and declared them founding members of her fake regime. With that locked in, I filed a formal report to the county clerk, flagged the HOA as illegally operating, and got the wheels turning to have their authority revoked completely. And that? That was just step one. Because I wasn't going to let her slither into the next neighborhood and start it all over again. Meanwhile, Karen started acting like a cornered raccoon in a pearl necklace. She must have noticed I wasn't reacting anymore. No emails. No calls. No angry replies. So she ramped things up. First, she sent out a neighborhood-wide newsletter claiming I was under investigation for aggressive and antisocial behavior. She even included a blurry photo of me yawning at the gas station, trying to make me look unhinged. She said I was harassing her and illegally interfering with HOA business. Cute. Then she called a mandatory community meeting in the park near her house. Started passing around a petition to have me removed as sheriff. She even had signs printed. My personal favorite? No law above the HOA. Honestly, it just made my job easier. But she wasn't done. She went for the most delusional move yet. She tried to break into the ruins of the lodge. Caught her on my cameras again, this time with a measuring tape and some guy she called a restoration consultant. She was trying to appraise the ashes. Appraise the ruins of a place she burned down herself. I pulled up in uniform. She played it cool. Oh. Just checking the site for insurance purposes, she said, smiling like nothing happened, squinting like the sun owed her money. For your insurance? I asked. Let the question hang. She blinked. Well, community insurance. We're assuming responsibility now. It's being annexed into the HOA proper, it's in transition. I looked down at the mud where her consultant was standing. Right on top of the fire pit my dad dug by hand, decades ago. My back hurt. My jaw was locked so tight I could feel my molars grinding. Deborah, I said calmly, you're trespassing. I'm going to have to ask you to leave, before I add another count to your file. That wiped the smug right off her face. You can't be serious. I'm the president of. I'm serious, I cut her off. You're the president of a fake organization with no legal authority, operating under forged documents, who committed arson, fraud, and is about to find herself in handcuffs unless she gets the hell off my land. The so-called consultant took one look at me, muttered something about not being paid enough, and made a beeline for his truck. Deborah flushed beet red. Opened her mouth like she was about to go full soprano, but then, she caught herself. Maybe it was the uniform. Maybe it was the mud on her boots. Maybe it was the look in my eyes, no longer annoyance, no longer a warning. Just that quiet, final fury of a man who's been patient too long. The next morning, I filed the arrest warrant myself. Didn't trust anyone else with it. Arson. Vandalism. Filing false claims. Harassment. Fraudulent legal documents. Impersonating an official. Wire tampering. The charges stacked higher than her HOA Christmas tree covered in gold-plated ornaments. Judge signed off that afternoon. But I wasn't done. I coordinated with some of her victims, the folks she bullied, fined, threatened into silence. I let them know what was coming. Asked if they wanted to see justice happen with their own eyes. They showed up with lawn chairs and popcorn. One guy even brought a megaphone. We rolled up to her pristine White House while she was mid-meeting in her front yard. Folding tables. Clipboards. HOA banners. She was ranting about someone's hedge height when I called out. Deborah Witherspoon. She turned, annoyed, then froze. I stepped forward and read the charges. Every last one. Her face moved from smug, to confused, to furious, to fear. I could see the moment it hit her. The realization that the man she'd harassed for months, the one whose lodge she burned, the one she dismissed as some redneck with a badge, was the one who just ended her little kingdom. You can't arrest me, she screamed. I'm the president. This is illegal. I held up the warrant. This says otherwise. As we escorted her to the cruiser, the neighbors she'd terrorized burst into applause. Someone played the national anthem on a Bluetooth speaker. She screamed something about lawsuits and civil liberties and threw herself onto her hydrangeas like she was in a soap opera. Didn't help. Just before we drove off, one of my deputies leaned in and asked, "You still want to charge her for the wedding tent?" I smiled. "Oh, I'm just getting started." Court day came quicker than I expected. Not because the system moves fast, it doesn't, but because I made sure it did. I dotted every I, crossed every T. I wanted this airtight. I wanted her to walk in thinking she could talk her way out of it, and watch the moment it all fell apart. She showed up in a beige pantsuit that screamed I've never done anything wrong in my life. Had a lawyer with her, the kind you get from a coupon mailer, billing her by the minute to pretend she had a defense. The courtroom wasn't packed, but it didn't need to be. Miss Lorna was there, with photos of her dismantled birdbath. Bill brought printouts of his mailbox color. Half a dozen more, with stacks of fake fines and HOA threats she mailed like confetti. And me. In uniform. Sitting tall. Not smug, just ready. Nobody was calling her Deborah anymore. She tried her act. Claimed the arson was a misunderstanding. Said she'd been clearing brush. Maybe she accidentally spilled gas. Said the lodge was abandoned. She thought she was doing the community a favor. Green development, she called it. Her lawyer tossed around words like civic duty and administrative error. But then we played the footage. Crystal clear. Her in camo. Dumping accelerant. Lighting a rag with theatrical flair like she was opening the Olympics. You could feel the air go out of the room. Her lawyer looked down at his notes and just stopped talking. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Play that again." We did. In silence. After that, it wasn't about if she was guilty. It was just about how guilty. The judge didn't hold back. 5 years probation. Mandatory community service. Full restitution, and not the pretend kind. Court-approved valuation of the lodge. Property damage. Emotional distress. Total, over $800,000. And because her insurance didn't cover intentional arson, every cent was on her. Man, that's a hell of a closer. You've already got that cathartic fire burning strong, but let me give it a final polish, keep all the grit and heart, just sharpen the flow and structure a bit so it lands even harder. Here's your finale. Her car. Her savings. And of course, her house. I didn't cheer. Didn't gloat. Just watched as her whole world cracked under the weight of her own arrogance. But the best part? That didn't happen in the courtroom. It came a week later, when I filed a civil suit on top of the criminal conviction. I wasn't in it for the money, the lodge was insured for part of its value, and I could rebuild. I wanted it public. Every fake fine. Every forged signature. Every illegal document. Exposed. On the record. I wanted it made clear that everything she built, every ounce of her fake power, was based on lies. And it worked. The county reviewed her HOA's charter and declared it invalid. Without legal standing, every action she took as president was nullified. Every lien, every threat, every cent she tried to wring out of people, gone. The so-called board dissolved. The bank moved fast. With her house tied up in court-ordered restitution and no HOA funds left to hide behind, she had to list her McMansion. Last I heard, it's been sitting on the market for months, sagging, price reduced, sign out front. Nobody wants to live in the castle of the HOA tyrant. And the community she terrorized? They threw a barbecue the weekend after the verdict. A real one. Ribs. Cornbread. Cold beer. Kids running barefoot through sprinklers. No clipboards. No rulebooks. No bans on plastic cutlery. People smiled again. Laughed. It felt like the air got lighter. Miss Lorna brought me a plate and said it felt like the end of a very long winter. I knew exactly what she meant. As for the lodge, I rebuilt it. Not exactly the same. Some things can't be replaced. But this time, I used fireproof materials. Reinforced the frame. Added solar panels. Built a stone fire pit right out front. Carved a new wooden sign, same style as my dad's. Just with one extra line underneath. Fox Hollow Lodge. Karen-proof since 2024. Made me laugh. I think Dad would have liked it, too. The final cherry on top? Her court-mandated community service. Assigned to county maintenance, graffiti cleanup, repainting benches, scrubbing public restrooms, including the park she once claimed was private HOA land. I drove by once. She was in a neon vest, power washing a sidewalk. A group of teens had their phones out, filming. She turned away from the camera, but someone shouted, "Hey, aren't you the lady who burned down a forest?" The look on her face almost made me feel sorry for her. Almost. She still tries sometimes. Appeals. Letters. Claims she was framed. Politically targeted. Doesn't matter. Every agency already has the evidence. Every judge has already seen the footage. Her name is dirt. Not even the HOA newsletter, now defunct, could spin it into anything salvageable. But I don't think about her much anymore. These days, I spend more time at the new lodge. Fixing the place up. Hunting in the fall. Drinking coffee on the deck when the fog rolls through the trees like smoke that didn't come to destroy. I planted wildflowers where the old foundation used to be. Let the forest take back what was stolen. I even rebuilt the memorial bench I'd made for my dad. Stained it darker. Sealed it twice. Bolted it to the ground. People still ask me sometimes if I regret not arresting her sooner. If I wish I'd thrown the book at her the first time she marched onto my land with her fake rules and her nonsense clipboard. And sure, maybe in some other version of the world, I would've. But in this one? I'm glad I waited. Because this wasn't just about punishing her. It was about showing people like her, the ones who think power means never hearing no, that the law does apply. And sometimes, the guy you've been messing with? Turns out he's the one writing the arrest warrant. In the end, all she had to do was leave me alone. Respect a line that wasn't hers to cross. But Karen never saw a boundary she didn't want to claim. Never heard a no she didn't think she could argue into a yes. So she lost everything. Me? I gained peace. And maybe, just maybe, a damn good story to tell. Whenever someone new moves in and asks what happened to the HOA around here, I just smile, point up toward the hills, and say, let's just say, they picked the wrong property to mess with. Then I offer them a coffee. No rules. No fines. No forms. Just neighbors. The way it ought to be.